In order to winterize your swimming pool returns, you'll need to first pump down the water level in the swimming pool at least 1 inch below the lowest return port. In theory, they're all going to be at the same height, but in reality, especially for older swimming pools, when you had to punch out those holes on site, they didn't come prefab from the manufacturer. Sometimes they would get set at different heights. Sometimes, unfortunately, they're set pretty darn low, and those pools require that you have to pump out more water, and that's an inconvenience and something you don't see too often nowadays with the newer generation of pools. But with the water level lowered, essentially what you're going to do is you're going to set up a blower in the pump room. So you're going to disconnect the pump and put the blower down in through the suction side of the pump. Then you're going to blow through there once you've removed, of course, all the return eyeballs from the swimming pool itself. Now, when you turn on the water, you can't just, or the air, you can't just simply blow through the line, let it blow a couple of minutes, turn it off, you're done. That's not how it works. Because most swimming pool return lines aren't going to be a direct line straight back to the pool. They're going to have a T in it somewhere and go out, branch out to a couple of different return locations. You need to go through a process to make sure that you get it all. And that process would be turn on the blower, and the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to see that water comes out of the return line closest to the pump room where you're blowing. So once the water stops coming out there, it came out for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, a whole bunch came out, and then it kind of stopped. Now what? Well, if you have two people, one person goes and they cover that with their hand. They just try to cover it completely with their hand. If you're doing it by yourself, just do it with a set of plugs. So take your winterization plugs and go to that first one where the water came out and plug it. As soon as you attempt to obstruct that flow, what's going to happen is you're going to feel a pressure buildup, and then the water is going to exit from the next closest return down the line, and you'll feel it let go, and you'll see all the water evacuate into the pool at that point. So you've plugged the first one now, and the second one has run for a couple of minutes, and now there's no water coming out it either. If there's only two, then what you do is you remove that first one again, and you go and put it down into the last port. And basically what you're doing is just double checking to make sure you don't know what's going on underground with the way that they plumbed this in. So just to make sure you're doing this right, try plugging both ends, and that way if there's any water that's left in there, you're going to be able to get it out. Now, the one other thing that most swimming pool technicians would do that most pool owners might not think to do is, so let's take a step back. You turned on the blower, the water came out of the closest return, it stopped coming out, so you plugged it. Now you go to the second return where the water's coming out, and the water's now pretty much stopped, but the air's all still coming out. So what you can do is take your fingers and just put it down inside of the return port, and that's going to increase the velocity at which the air is exiting from that return. In increasing the velocity of the air, you're going to atomize some of the residual water that's still clinging to the sides and sitting on the bottom that can't get past the flange, and you're going to help to eject that. And you should see, as you put your fingers in there and increase the velocity of air, you'll get some misting effect that's coming out of the return, and that lets you know that you're doing it right. And so basically do that for every return in your pool. Plug all return ports except for one, and then obstruct the airflow somewhat to increase the velocity that the air comes out of the return, and then switch the plug orientations and do it again. And just by cycling through that process, that's how you get all of the air out of the return lines. Or all the water out of the return lines, sorry. Once all the water is out of the system completely, take 12 inches of foam rope, put it into the return port, and then put your winterization plug in place. If it's a thread-in style, you need a thread sealant like Teflon tape, or the rubber expandable style with a butterfly nut that you tighten in place. Either way, be sure to use that foam rope. In theory, it's not needed. If you've done your job and there's no water left in the return, then how could it break, right? Well, maybe the plugs leak. Maybe one of the plugs falls out. Maybe the Teflon tape didn't hold as good as you thought, and it's actually leaking water in there slowly, and over the course of the winter season, enough builds up that it could freeze and break something. So that's why you use just a bunch of foam rope in there, just to help one extra step to try to prevent some damage from happening. But if you follow this process described here, there's a good chance that you got all of the water out of the system and that you're not going to have any problems at all when springtime comes.